Have you ever woken up one morning and felt an unfamiliar emptiness as if a part of you had been slowly fading away? It's a quiet, unsettling realization, one that creeps in like the first chill of autumn, signaling a shift you can't ignore. You look back at the years you've spent giving, sacrificing, holding everything together for those you love. The late nights, the compromises, the silent burdens you carried without complaint. And now, as the seasons of life change, a question lingers in the back of your mind, soft but persistent. After all I've given, what is left for me? This emptiness isn't a sign of ingratitude or failure. It's the soul's way of asking for balance. For decades, you've poured from your cup, believing that love and loyalty would naturally be returned. But life doesn't always work that way. People move forward, circumstances change, and the energy you invested so freely may not circle back to you in the way you hoped. And so you stand at a crossroads, not because you've lost your way, but because you're finally pausing long enough to ask, what do I need now? Life is fleeting, like the morning mist that rises from the river, only to vanish with the first rays of sunlight. Time slips through our fingers, doesn't it? One day, you're building a career, raising a family, tending to relationships, always in motion, always giving. Then, almost without warning, the rhythm changes. The house grows quieter. The demands lessen. And in that stillness, you may feel a strange hollowness, as if the roles that once defined you no longer fit. Where did all that energy go? More importantly, who's replenishing it? It's a painful truth to face. The people you've supported may not even realize how much of yourself you've given. Not because they don't care, but because they're caught in their own journeys, their own struggles, dreams, and responsibilities. And if you spend these precious years waiting for them to notice, to reciprocate, you risk becoming a silent prisoner of your own generosity. Buddhism teaches us a profound truth. Attachment to expectations leads to suffering. We believe that if we love deeply, care tirelessly, and sacrifice willingly, the universe will return that kindness in equal measure. But the world doesn't operate on ledgers. Love isn't a transaction, and devotion doesn't come with guarantees. The younger generations especially are navigating a world vastly different from the one you knew. Their priorities, their challenges, even their ways of connecting are shaped by forces you may not fully recognize. If you tie your happiness to their attention or approval, you're setting yourself up for heartache. This isn't a call to bitterness or withdrawal. It's an invitation to release, to stop clutching the expectation that others will fill the spaces inside you that only you can heal. So what is the answer? It's not in grasping for recognition or chasing relationships that no longer nourish you. The answer is simple yet profound. You must choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. This is the season to reclaim your energy, to turn inward and tend to the parts of you that have been neglected. Rediscover old passions. Sit with solitude until it becomes a companion, not a void. Create a life that doesn't depend on external validation to feel meaningful. This isn't retreat. It's returning. Returning to the essence of who you are, beyond roles and responsibilities. To the quiet joys you forgot you loved. To the peace of existing without apology or explanation. Because in the end, the greatest act of love you can give the world is to first love yourself. When you nurture your own spirit, you're not abandoning others. You're leading by example, showing them that a life well lived isn't measured by how much you gave away, but by how whole you remained in the process. So let this be your gentle awakening. You are allowed to rest, to be still, to exist for your own sake. The love you've poured into the world hasn't vanished. It's simply time to redirect some of it back to its source. You, the illusion of reciprocity. We spend our lives weaving invisible threads of connection, believing with quiet certainty that the love, kindness, and sacrifices we offer will one day return to us like the tide. This belief is not just hopeful, it's deeply human. From childhood, we're taught that goodness begets goodness, that loyalty is a circle, not a one-way path. We give with open hands, trusting that our gestures will be remembered, that our efforts will be honored, that time will soften the edges of our solitude with the warmth of returned care. But life does not follow such arithmetic. The truth is far more nuanced and far more liberating if we dare to see it. Love is not a transaction. The relationships we nurture, the sacrifices we make, the emotional labor we pour into others, these are not deposits in a future emotional bank account. They are offerings given in a moment with no guarantee of return. And when we cling to the expectation that they should be repaid, we set ourselves up for a quiet, lingering grief. The myth of fairness in love. Consider the story of Robert, a man who spent 40 years working overtime to give his children the education he never had. He missed birthdays, anniversaries, even his own health checkups, all for the sake of providing. In his mind, this was an unspoken contract. One day when I'm older, they'll be there for me. But years later, when retirement left him with too much empty time and too few phone calls, he realized something painful. His children loved him, yes, but they were living their own lives, raising their own families, chasing their own dreams. They didn't owe him his vision of reciprocity. They couldn't. This is the heartbreak of the illusion. We mistake love for a ledger. We assume that because we gave time, others will give it back. Because we listened, others will listen in return. Because we showed up, others will show up for us. But people love in the ways they know how, not necessarily in the ways we expect. Anicca. The Buddha's wisdom on impermanence. Buddhism teaches anicca, the truth that all things are transient, including relationships. The bond between parent and child shifts as the child grows. Friendships that once felt unbreakable fade when life pulls people in different directions. Even marriages, built on decades of shared history, can become quiet as two people age at different speeds. This isn't betrayal. It's simply the nature of existence. The suffering comes not from the change itself, but from our resistance to it, from the stories we tell ourselves. After all I've done, how could they forget me? I was always there for them. Why aren't they here for me now? These questions aren't wrong. They're human, but they're also cages. The silent contracts we never signed. Every act of love comes with an invisible line we often don't even realize we've written. Because I did this for you, you will do this for me. The mother who assumes her caregiving will be reciprocated in old age. The friend who listens endlessly then feels abandoned when their own struggles go unheard. The partner who sacrifices career dreams for the relationship then resents not being paid back in devotion. These expectations are natural, but they are also the root of much sorrow. Why? Because no one agreed to these terms except us. The people we love are not characters in our story. They are living their own. The liberation of unconditional giving. This is not a call to stop loving or to harden the heart. It's an invitation to love differently, freely, without the weight of expectation. There is a profound peace in giving simply because it aligns with who you are, not because you're waiting for a return. The elderly woman who bakes cookies for her neighbors, not so they'll visit, but because baking brings her joy. The father who supports his son's dreams without keeping score, because seeing him thrive is enough. The friend who listens without tallying how often they're heard in return, because presence is its own reward. This is love without chains. What do we do with the loneliness? Even with this wisdom, the ache of unmet expectations can linger. That's okay. The goal isn't to never feel hurt. It's to stop letting that hurt define us. 1. Grieve the disappointment. It's okay to mourn the love you thought would come back. Acknowledge it, then release it. 2. Redirect the energy. The care you once poured outward, pour some inward. Rediscover old passions, cultivate new connections. 3. Reframe the narrative. Instead of "they forgot me," try "I loved fully." And that matters. 4. Embrace impermanent love. Some bonds last a season. That doesn't erase their beauty. The unexpected gift in letting go. When we stop demanding reciprocity, 2 miracles happen. 1. We stop keeping score, and love becomes lighter. 2. We start recognizing the love that does exist, just not always in the forms we expected. The neighbor who checks in, the old friend who still remembers your birthday, the quiet moments of contentment you build for yourself. Love like the sun. The sun does not shine expecting gratitude. It shines because that is its nature. We too can learn to love like this, not as an investment, but as an expression of who we are. And in that shift, we find a freedom more sustaining than any returned favor. The freedom to have loved and to know that was enough. Reclaiming your energy, the sacred art of self-return. There comes a moment in life when the scales tip, when you realize, with startling clarity, that the energy you've spent decades pouring into others must now be redirected inward. This is not selfishness, this is survival, this is wisdom. For years, perhaps for most of your life, you operated under an unspoken assumption that if you gave enough love, enough time, enough patience, the universe would balance the equation. But life doesn't work like mathematics. Energy given is not energy owed. And now, in the autumn of your years, a quiet revolution begins, the reclamation of your own vitality. The great unlearning. We are conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to our usefulness, to how much we can do for others. Parents are praised for self-sacrifice. Employees are valued for overtime. Friends are celebrated for always being available. But this constant outflow comes at a cost. The slow erosion of the self. Consider the metaphor of an ancient well. For years, villagers come to draw water. For drinking, for cooking, for washing. The well gives without complaint. But one day the water runs cloudy, then scarce. The villagers move on to newer wells, leaving the old one dry and forgotten. The tragedy? No one thought to replenish it. This is what happens when we confuse love with depletion. The myth of later. Many of us live with the fantasy of later. When I retire, I'll focus on myself. Once the kids are settled, I'll pursue me passions. When things calm down, I'll rest. But later is a mirage. The truth is this: if you don't prioritize yourself now, you may forget how. Mr. Huang's story illustrates this beautifully. For 40 years, he measured his value by his ability to nurture others. When that role ended, he faced an existential void, not because his life lacked meaning, but because he'd never been taught to find meaning within himself. The violin became his bridge back to his own essence. The 3 pillars of energy reclamation. 1. Boundaries, the art of loving. From a distance, boundaries aren't walls. They are gates that let you choose what enters your sacred space. Say no without apology. to demands that drain you. Release guilt about not being constantly available. Understand that protecting your energy isn't rejection, it's respect. 2. Rediscovery. Excavating your buried self. Beneath the layers of roles and responsibilities, your original self still exists. What made your heart race at 20? Try it again. What did you pretend not to love because others dismissed it? Embrace it now. What small pleasure have you denied yourself as frivolous? It's not. 3. Presence. The radical act of being here. Aging minds often live in two painful places: the past, regrets, and the future, fears. But power lies in the present. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Notice how light filters through leaves. Taste your tea as if it's your first and last cup. The alchemy of solitude society pathologizes being alone, equating it with loneliness. But solitude is where transformation happens. In silence, you hear your own thoughts again. In stillness, you feel your own rhythms. In separation, you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. The Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, offers wisdom here. You don't hike to reach a destination. You wander to be changed by the journey. Similarly, time spent reclaiming your energy isn't about achieving, it's about being. The gift of enough. A breakthrough moment comes when you realize you've given enough. You've proven enough. You've sacrificed enough. This isn't resignation, it's liberation. When you stop seeking validation through service, you discover a profound truth. Your existence is justification enough. Practical steps toward reclamation. 1. The energy audit. For 1 week, track where your time and attention goes. Then ask, which activities replenish me? Which deplete me? What can I release without guilt? 2. The 1% rule. Each day, reclaim 1% of your energy. Read 1 poem instead of scrolling news. Sit for 5 minutes before starting chores. Decline 1 obligation that doesn't spark joy. 3. Create a soul altar. Dedicate a small space to your rebirth. A chair with a favorite blanket. A shelf with inspiring books. A notebook for uncensored thoughts. The wisdom of trees. Consider how a maple tree operates. In spring, summer, it gives shade, oxygen, beauty. In autumn, it takes, pulling energy back into its core. In winter, it rests, standing bare but unbroken. We are no different. Your later years are not about decline. They're about wise conservation. A new metric for living. Replace how much can I still do with how deeply can I experience this moment? How gently can I treat myself today? How authentically can I live now? The unexpected reward. Here's the secret no one tells you. When you stop begging for crumbs of attention and instead feast on your own company, 2 things happen. 1. The right people, they're drawn to your radiance. 2. You stop noticing who isn't there. Your invitation. This is your permission slip to spend an entire afternoon doing nothing important. To pursue interests that won't impress anyone. To measure your days by peace, not productivity. The light you've spent a lifetime shining outward, turn it inward, not because others don't deserve it, but because you do. The power of silence. Silence is often misunderstood. In youth, people feel an overwhelming need to speak, to explain themselves, to defend their choices, to debate, to prove their worth. They raise their voices, hoping to be heard, believing that words alone can shape reality. There is an urgency in their speech, a fear that if they do not assert themselves, they will be overlooked, forgotten, or dismissed. And so, they fill the air with words, mistaking volume for wisdom, frequency for importance. But as one ages, a realization dawns. Most people do not listen to understand. They listen to reply. Conversations become battlegrounds, where words are weapons, where the goal is not mutual understanding, but victory. And yet, more often than not, no one truly wins. Arguments exhaust rather than enlighten. Debates divide rather than unite. And the more one speaks, the less one is truly heard. Buddhism teaches that speech should be measured and purposeful. Right speech, samavaka, is one of the eightfold paths to enlightenment. It does not mean remaining silent at all times, but rather choosing words wisely, speaking only when necessary, when words serve a purpose of truth and kindness. And when they do not, silence is often the wiser path. The Buddha himself cautioned against idle chatter, gossip, and harsh speech, recognizing that words once spoken cannot be taken back. They linger in the air, shaping perceptions, relationships, and even one's own mind. There is a story of an elderly monk who had once been a celebrated scholar. He had spent decades debating philosophical concepts, engaging in discussions that at the time seemed vital. His words had won him respect, followers, even fame. But one day, he encountered a young, arrogant student who challenged him. The boy, full of bravado, spoke in rapid bursts, attempting to prove that the old monk's knowledge was outdated, irrelevant. The monk listened, nodding occasionally, never interrupting. When the student had finished, the old monk simply smiled and said, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts." Then he walked away. The student was stunned. He had expected a rebuttal, a counter-argument, some form of validation for his engagement. But the monk had given him nothing to push against. No resistance, no conflict. There was no battle to be won, no ego to be fed. Over time, the young man came to realize the lesson in that silence. Not every battle needs to be fought. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom is in knowing when to let go. The illusion of control. Through words, picture an old man arguing with a younger colleague, trying to prove that his years of experience should be respected. The young man, eager to assert himself, dismisses his wisdom, insisting that times have changed and that experience is outdated. The old man could argue, could try to convince the younger one of his worth, but instead, he simply smiles and walks away, carrying his wisdom within him, needing no validation. That is the power of silence. In a world that prizes noise, constant notifications, opinions, arguments, it takes strength to choose stillness. The modern mind is conditioned to respond, to react, to be heard at all costs. We fear silence as if it implies ignorance, weakness, or surrender. But silence is not passive. It is a discipline, a skill, and above all, a form of wisdom. It is the ability to listen without rushing to speak, to observe without the need to correct, to let others hold their opinions without demanding agreement. There is an old Zen saying, "Do not speak unless you can improve the silence." How many words, spoken in frustration or pride, truly improve the moment? How often do we regret the things said in anger or haste? Silence as a form of strength. True power lies not in how much one speaks, but in how much one understands without having to say a word. Consider a mother and daughter locked in an argument. The daughter, full of youthful passion, accuses her mother of being too controlling, too overprotective. The mother, wounded, feels the urge to defend herself, to explain her actions, to make her daughter see reason. But instead of arguing, she listens. She lets her daughter speak, lets her emotions run their course. When the daughter is finished, the mother takes a deep breath and says, "I hear you." That moment of quiet acknowledgement does more than any lengthy defense ever could. Silence, paired with presence, has a weight that words often lack. This is not to say that silence is always the answer. There are times when words must be spoken, when injustice must be called out, when truth must be defended. But the difference is in intention. Are the words spoken out of ego, out of a need to be right, or are they spoken with clarity and purpose? A wise person knows when to speak and when to remain silent. They understand that silence does not mean weakness. It means mastery over one's impulses. It means knowing that some conversations are not worth the energy, that some arguments cannot be won, that the peace of mind gained from walking away is worth more than the fleeting satisfaction of proving a point. The discipline of silence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of awareness. It is the space between thoughts where clarity emerges, where true listening happens. In meditation, one learns that the mind is constantly generating noise, thoughts, judgments, reactions. The practice is not to suppress them, but to observe them without attachment, to let them pass like clouds in the sky. The same principle applies to speech. When we refrain from speaking unnecessarily, we create space for deeper understanding, for reflection, for connection. We allow others the dignity of their own thoughts without imposing ours upon them, the wisdom of knowing when to walk away. So the next time you feel the need to defend yourself, to argue, to prove your worth through words, pause. Ask yourself, is this necessary? Will my words bring clarity or only more noise? If the answer is unclear, choose silence. Let your wisdom speak for itself. Because in the end, it is not the loudest voice that holds power, but the one that speaks only when it truly matters. Observing instead of interfering. There is a deep-seated urge within us to correct, to guide, to step in, and shield others from the mistakes we once made. It comes from a place of love, from experience hard-earned, through our own struggles. We see a child making a decision that we know will lead to disappointment. We watch a friend trapped in a pattern of self-destruction. We feel the impulse to intervene, to save them from pain, to offer our wisdom so they do not have to suffer as we once did. But here's the reality. Wisdom, when given freely and unsolicited, is rarely accepted. Most people must walk their own path, stumble on their own stones, and learn through their own experiences. No matter how clearly we see the pitfalls ahead, no matter how desperately we want to spare them hardship, true understanding cannot be transferred like information. It must be lived. The nature of suffering, as a teacher Buddha himself, when asked to intervene in the quarrels of others, often responded with silence. Not because he was indifferent, but because he understood the nature of suffering. Pain is a teacher. Struggle is a sculptor, carving away ignorance and delusion, shaping the soul with every hardship endured. If we step in too soon, if we rob someone of their lesson, we deny them the growth that pain was meant to provide. Consider the caterpillar, which must struggle out of its cocoon to strengthen its wings. If someone peels it open too soon, the butterfly never flies. The struggle is not an obstacle. It is the very process that makes flight possible. In the same way, human beings must face their own challenges to develop resilience, insight, and strength. The futility of forcing change. Take, for example, the story of Anand, a devoted son who watched his father gamble away their family's wealth. Night after night, Anand pleaded with his father to stop. He presented logic, he expressed his pain, he even sought help from relatives. But his father was unmoved. No amount of words, no desperate arguments No threats could change his behavior. Frustrated and exhausted, Anand made a difficult decision. He let go. Instead of trying to control his father, he shifted his focus inward. He worked harder, built a secure future for himself, and refused to let his father's choices dictate his own peace. Years later, when his father hit rock bottom, he sought out Anand, not for money, but for understanding. It was only then, when he had faced the full weight of his own mistakes, that he was ready to listen. This is the essence of detachment, not abandonment, but trust. Trust that the universe unfolds as it should, that people must experience their own lessons at their own pace. The difference between love and controlled attachment does not mean indifference. It is not coldness or apathy. It is the ability to love without possession, to care without control. It means focusing not on changing others, but on what is within our reach, our own peace, our own actions, our own responses. Imagine holding a bird in your hand. Squeeze too tightly, and you crush it. Hold it with an open palm, and it may stay, or it may fly. But either way, it is free, and so are you. The wisdom of the old fisherman. Consider the old fisherman who lived by a river. Every day, he watched young men struggle against the current, trying to swim across, despite the dangers. Many times, he had the urge to call out, to warn them, to tell them to take the safer route further downstream. But he knew that some lessons must be learned firsthand, so he remained silent. And in time, those who struggled eventually found the strength to swim more skillfully, or learn to respect the river's force. Had he intervened, they might have never developed that wisdom on their own. The art of stepping back. Not everything needs our interference. Not every battle is ours to fight. There is an art in stepping back, in allowing life to be what it is, without our constant attempt to shape it. True wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to help and when to step aside. So the next time you feel the urge to correct, to fix, to change someone, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this for them or for my own discomfort with their struggle? If the answer is the latter, let go. Focus on what you can control, your own energy, your own journey, your own peace. Because at the end of the day, the only person you truly have the power to change is yourself. Letting go of the need for approval. One of the greatest sources of suffering is the need for approval. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek validation, to be praised for our achievements, to be accepted by our peers, to be loved by our families. This craving for approval seeps into every facet of life. The way we dress, the career paths we choose, the relationships we enter. People spend years, sometimes decades, shaping their actions based on how others perceive them. They fear rejection, long for appreciation, and crave acknowledgement. But as time passes and the later years of life arrive, a crucial question emerges. Why am I still trying to prove myself? The story of Lila, a life lived for others. There is a story of an old woman named Lila, who had spent most of her life seeking the approval of others. As a young girl, she was the obedient daughter, always striving to make her parents proud. As a wife, she sacrificed her own dreams to be the supportive partner. As a mother, she placed the needs of her children above all else. But when she found herself alone in her 60s, with her children grown and her husband gone, she realized something unsettling. She had never truly lived for herself. Every decision, every sacrifice had been made with someone else's approval in mind. And now, standing in the silence of her own existence, she wondered, who am I when no one is watching? The illusion of external validation. The truth is, no amount of external validation can bring lasting peace. The more one chases approval, the more power they give away. The Buddha taught that true happiness arises not from being understood by others, but from understanding oneself. Imagine a traveler carrying a heavy sack on their back, filled with the opinions and expectations of others. Each step they take is burdened by the weight of what society thinks, what their family wants, what their friends expect. But what would happen if, just for a moment, they set the sack down? The relief, the lightness, the sudden realization that the journey could be so much easier. This is the freedom that comes from releasing the need for approval. Redefining self-worth. Letting go does not mean becoming indifferent or isolating oneself from others. It means redefining the source of one's worth. It means asking, do I like who I am? Do I live in alignment with my values? It is a shift from looking outward for validation to turning inward for acceptance. And in that shift, there is liberation. The story of Anand, from success to simplicity. Take the story of Anand, a former businessman who spent years in pursuit of recognition. He built an empire, gathered wealth, and climbed every ladder that society deemed worthy of admiration. Yet, despite his success, he often felt hollow inside. There was always another deal to close, another person to impress, another standard to meet. It wasn't until he walked away from his career, moving to a small village to live a simpler life, that he felt truly free for the first time. He was not performing for anyone. He woke with the sun, worked with his hands, and found joy in the smallest of things. When an old colleague asked him if he missed the prestige, he simply smiled and said, "I have nothing to prove, and that is my greatest achievement." The fleeting nature of approval. The need for approval is an illusion, a mirage that keeps us running towards something that can never truly satisfy. Approval is fleeting, always dependent on the whims of others. But self-acceptance, that is unshakable. It is the foundation of true peace. Think about the great masters, the monks who retreat into silence, the sages who live on mountaintops. They are not concerned with applause or admiration. They do not measure their worth by external recognition. They have found something far more valuable: contentment within themselves. The practice of letting go of the need for approval, is not an overnight process. It takes practice, patience, and deep introspection. It requires the courage to say, "I am enough as I am," even when the world says otherwise. It means standing firm in one's truth, even if it goes against the expectations of others. It is the art of choosing authenticity over acceptance, peace over performance, a life free from external validation. So ask yourself, what would my life look like if I stopped seeking approval? What choices would I make if I truly didn't care about the opinions of others? And then, slowly but surely, begin to walk in that direction. Because at the end of the day, the only person whose approval you truly need is your own. Conclusion: choosing yourself, the greatest act of self-respect. It is recognizing that personal well-being is not a luxury. It is a necessity. For too long, we have been conditioned to believe that prioritizing ourselves is selfish, that choosing peace means turning our backs on others. But the truth is, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Your body, your mind, your soul, they all require care, just as surely as a tree needs water, sunlight, and space to grow. Returning to yourself. Think about it. When was the last time you truly checked in with yourself? Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When was the last time you sat in silence and listened to your own thoughts, your own desires, your own truth. Life has a way of sweeping us up, in obligations, in expectations, in the relentless demands of others. But here, in this moment, you are being called to return to yourself, embracing the later years with self-respect. As you enter the later years of life, remember this: you owe no one an explanation for choosing peace. You do not need permission to prioritize yourself. Happiness is not something given. It is something claimed. Let go of resentment. Release expectations. Allow yourself the freedom to step fully into your own presence, the quiet strength of choosing yourself. You have spent years, perhaps decades, giving, sacrificing, and shaping yourself to fit the needs of others. But now this chapter is yours. It is time to nurture your own well-being, to cultivate joy, and to embrace the simple, profound contentment of just being. There is a quiet strength in choosing yourself, not out of defiance, but out of love. Love for the person you have become, love for the journey you have walked, love for the life that still lies ahead, waiting to be lived on your own terms, moving forward with peace. The river of life flows forward, and so must you. Not in search of validation, not chasing approval, but moving with the gentle ease of someone who knows that peace is not found outside. It is cultivated within. So take a deep breath. Feel the weight lifting from your shoulders. Step into your next chapter with grace, with purpose, with unwavering self-respect. Final reminder: your happiness is yours to claim. And remember, your happiness is not up for debate. It is yours to own, yours to create, yours to embrace. If this message resonated with you, if you felt even a small shift within your heart, consider subscribing to this channel. Here, we walk the path together, finding wisdom, peace, and strength in every step. Let's continue this journey toward a life of true fulfillment, one where you are finally, unapologetically, choosing yourself. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of yourself, because you are worth it.